History teaches us that when people suffer misery for a long enough period of time, eventually their value systems change to the point where they're no longer miserable. Now, there was a prediction that I made in the last 6 months that has really rubbed a lot of people in my audience the wrong way. Well, what if I told you it's already started to come true even before the lights have gone out because of the amount of suffering that's already been instilled in this country just in the last couple of years? When people think of Mexico, they usually think of one of two or three things. They think of beautiful, warm beaches. They think of migrants coming here, or they think of slums. But what if I told you North Americans, U.S. citizens, were flooding to Mexico in droves? Why? Because of capitalism. North Americans are getting tired of socialism. Now, some of you might think, well, I'm tired of socialism too. Oh, it's not the kind of socialism that you think of. It's the kind of socialism that is invisible, that is making everything in America almost impossible to afford. Now, what am I talking about? I made the allegation long ago that in North America, we would start to see the rise of a push to legalize prostitution again. What if I told you this entire time it's been legal in Mexico and it's way less expensive? Now, the reason you don't see prostitutes on every street corner in every city in North America is because it's illegal, even though, ironically, the U.S. is the number one producer of pornography in the world and the number one consumer of it as well, per capita. The vast majority of the states and cities in this country ban prostitution. Now, my allegation was this: there are going to be conversations across dining room tables where perhaps the female in the household says, look, we are going backwards on credit cards right now. We need an extra $1,000, an extra $1,200 every month to stop the bleeding and start getting things paid off. If we don't do this, if we don't find a source for that money, we're going to lose everything. And I'm not taking the kids to a tent city. We're not going to a homeless shelter. We're not losing the house. So here's what's going to happen. While you're at work, I'm going to part-time do out calls and in calls, whatever I have to do. If you don't think that's the case, and what this is tied to is very, very important, everybody needs to pay attention to this, just stick around. I've got proof this is already starting to happen. More Americans suffering than ever before. Poll: amid economic decline, a record number of people have rated their lives as poor, especially since 2020. Struggling or suffering through the roof. Now, what's the real important piece of information? Mexico City becomes work from home haven for U.S. expats, but locals are getting priced out. What's happening? Well, a lot of big businesses are like, hey, we don't have to bring people into the office. All of this space that we're renting, all of these cubicles, all of that parking, we don't have to pay for any of it. They can work from home. And people are excited about that. They love working from home, especially when home doesn't have to necessarily be where they are at the moment. They're going to go where things are cheaper. And Mexico City is super cheap. But the problem is they're going into these old neighborhoods in Mexico and they're taking over these neighborhoods, and a lot of the locals can't afford the new rents. Americans can afford them, but not these people. 54-year-old business, bakery, shut so that the landlord could turn the entire building into flats for Americans. Now, some might say, well, Florida Maquis, I would never want to live in Mexico City. Really? Let me show you something. This is Numbeo.com, food prices by country. Now, this is in the peso. Milk, $5.64 pesos. Loaf of bread, 8.93. You want to see what it is in US dollars? Let me zoom this in again. Milk is 28 cents per quarter liter. A loaf of bread is 44 cents. Eggs, 33 cents. Cheese, chicken, apples, bananas, oranges, all way less expensive. Daily recommended minimum amount of money for food per person for a month. How many of you think you could make it on $189.94 per month? The way groceries are right now. That's why people are moving to Mexico. Oh, and by the way, prostitution in Mexico is legal. So imagine this. Your grocery bill gets cut in a third. You don't necessarily have to be married. And do you know how much prostitutes make in Mexico? See, prostitution in Mexico is different than here, as it is in most of Latin America. It's a regular job. I guarantee the vast majority of the people in my audience don't know a full-time sex worker. In Ecuador, Colombia, Venezuela, Mexico, it's very common. Researcher from University of Michigan hired sex workers in Ecuador and Mexico just to compare, to interview other sex workers employed in brothels and the street prostitutes, as sex workers have a keen sense as to what clients consider beautiful. Sex workers in Ecuador make $5 per hour. Mexican prostitutes make $12 an hour. Now, that's not the most important statistic here. This is. Most prostitutes worked a 40-hour week. A Mexican prostitute can expect to make about 5 times what the income of an average household there is. Mexican prostitutes working 40 hours a week, making $12 an hour, make 5 times the average income. Now, are these a bunch of strung out girls that just have nothing going for them? 3/4 of each had children, and between 20 and 50% of them were married. Many of them have high school educations, at least. Now, what's the story in Florida? Landlords, socialist landlords, try to stop rent control initiative in Florida. Capitalist landlords. It's the people that live in these places that are the socialists. Ballots haven't even been printed yet, but already a group of landlords, apartment managers, and real estate agents in Florida want to stop voters from deciding on a measure that would implement rent control for a year. Price controls. This is what virtually everybody on Fox News and all of the pro-capitalist folks were screaming about in Venezuela. Price controls on rents. Venezuela, to protect its people, would not allow landlords to raise rents above a certain level each year. And every talking head on Fox News was like, price controls, socialism, it's what destroys economies, price controls. Well, guess where they're doing it? Orlando. If passed by voters in the fall, it would be the first such measure in decades in the Sunshine State. Florida going socialist? Florida going socialist and Mexico going capitalist. Imagine, this is a scene from Black Sails. You go to a hotel for the night. Let's say you're going on vacation. And you check in, and they give you the key to your room. And you go up to your room, and it's a beautiful room. And there's menus over here on the table. At the back of the menus, you can get food, you can get drinks. There's all sorts of entertainment options. Or there's 3 or 4 pages of escorts, both male and female, with prices and descriptions. Now, what if you think, well, wait a minute, what am I, in some seedy side of town where they offer girls with the rooms? Well, you'd have to ask yourself a question. See, that was the case in the Caribbean in the 1700s. What happened between the 1700s and the 1900s in this country? Oh, by the way, this is a downtown Mexico City, statue of Diana, completely in the buff. Another picture. I'll tell you what happened. Christian socialism happened. Christians took control of the direction of this country in the late 1800s and began banning things and getting rid of things. Even prostitutes in Scandinavia have to dress a certain way on the street. They can't just walk around in bikinis or less, or string bikinis. They'll get picked up for indecent exposure. See, the reason that there are even bathing suits like this on the beach in most of North America where there are beaches is because of Christian socialism standards. Because you can't make any allegation there's some kind of a health issue with skinny dipping in the ocean. Humankind skinny dipped in the ocean literally for all of history, other than the last maybe couple hundred years. This, believe it or not, is evidence of Christian socialism, saying there has to be a minimum amount covered or you'll be arrested. But everybody's done it. Everybody's waited till it's all dark and stripped off and ran out, and whether it was the ocean or a lake somewhere. And we got rid of this, didn't we? We got rid of this. Please tell me about the morality of throwing away food. That's perfectly fine, because tomorrow it may or may not go bad. These people over here wanting to earn the money to buy the food, they don't have it now, but they have clients that would willingly pay them so that they could take this food home instead of it going to the garbage, the rats, and feed their families. Because somebody 500 or 800 or 1,000 miles away has a moral problem with the circumstances of how the money changes hands. See, 100 and something years ago, this woman here had a huge moral problem with the woman standing here and how she appeared with her horribly immoral haircut and the jewelry hanging around her neck and the deep V and showing the ankles. I always wondered about this term in the Bible, why they described the final Babylon as the harlot. I mean, out of all of the things that Babylon represented, the arrogance and the cruelty and the self-reliance and almost atheism, that this would be something so particular. Well, now I get it. Now I get it. See, eventually this is going to bleed its way into North America, because now we have two countries competing on two wildly unlevel playing fields. Mexico has gone full capitalist. Even though they have a somewhat socialist leader, pretty much anything down there now that you want to purchase, you can get it. And they're not listening to any moral speeches from North America, given that, once again, I'll say it again, North America is the number one producer of pornography in the world and the number one per capita consumer of it. So it's not some moral high ground that we have over Mexico. You see the images of their people walking here. You don't see the images of all of the Americans, former U.S. expatriates, flying into Mexico City and setting up shop. You don't see the thousands and thousands and thousands of them displacing Mexican workers. Oh, and believe me, the Mexican prostitutes are going to love it. Because what do they make, $12 an hour? American men down there start throwing around 50s and 100s. It's going to be a new gold rush. I mean, imagine being a single guy. They're saying, yeah, you can relocate to wherever you want. The cheapest place to go is Mexico City. Your grocery bill will be a third. And hey, ladies of the night, nothing illegal. You've got zero risk involved, other than maybe a run of antibiotics. Mark my words. It's all going to come crashing down. Because it's a giant hypocritical deck of cards. The U.S. likes to waggle its moral pretentious finger at everyone else in the world, while right now, we're the source of the vast majority of the problems. And I know that sounds like it's unpatriotic. It's just the reality. It's just the reality. In supposed super great, fantastic capitalist Florida, they're talking about rent and price controls that the socialists in Venezuela would have loved to hear about. In Orlando. In Orlando. You know, when I make this description of what may have to happen in some U.S. households to pay the bills, and I'm sure people out there are like, oh, I can't, oh, I would never, oh my God. 20 to 50% of prostitutes in Mexico have husbands at home. That's right. 20 to 50% of them have a husband that probably has a job, has a day job. He has a day job, she has a night job. Or whatever. However they work it out. So it's already a reality. It's not even hypothetical. It just depends on where you live and what language you speak. So I'll leave it there. God bless. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.